Culture just sort of goes along with intelligence of a human order. When you have intelligence of a human order, it just automatically produces an accumulation of knowledge, generation after generation. You might even say that culture is innate to man. Just think. Man was not born a civilization builder. That's a fact. But he was born a culture builder. Stretch yourself. Imagine that the gods were as clever as I am. That they knew that man was a culture builder. Imagine that this didn't take them by surprise. That they were prepared to cope with culture builders. That they knew how to take care of culture builders as well as they knew how to take care of nest builders and web builders and dam builders. Try to imagine the gods being as competent as that. It's hard, I know, to imagine such a thing. Homo Magister has trained us to imagine God so differently, to imagine that he is really at a loss to know what to do with man. That there seems to be some problem there between God and man, and God can't seem to figure out how to lick it. He tries this, he tries that. Everything seems to work a little, but nothing seems to work very much. Nothing seems to produce the desired result, which isn't always entirely clear. It's difficult, but try to imagine that the gods I'm talking about were not baffled to know what to do with man. Go a bit further. Imagine that the community of life being shaped in the hands of the gods was as well prepared for the appearance of culture builders as it had been for the appearance of nest builders. Imagine that the community was as well shaped to be the home of culture builders as it had been to be the home of web builders or dam builders. Try to imagine that the gods knew their business to that extent. That, too, I know is hard. Homo Magister has trained us to imagine that the world as it was, as God made it, was a wretched home for man, an entirely inappropriate and inadequate home for man, even hostile to man. It was, in fact, a rotten place to live, as God made it. Not a home at all. It was a jungle, a home for apes, not a home for man. It was a bungled job. God made the world for man, but he bungled it. Man himself had to put it right. He had to take over the job himself, had to build his own home, his true home, away from the jungle. It's hard, I know, but try. Try to imagine something different from that. Gods who were not bunglers. Gods who knew their business. Gods who knew what they were doing with the world, with man. If you can't imagine it, ask an anthropologist. He or she will tell you something outrageous. That our ancestors were well adapted to live in the world as the gods made it. That the world was well shaped to be the home of man. He or she will tell you something even worse. That people who live the way our ancestors live have an easier time staying alive than we do. Much easier. They expend less time and energy getting the things they need than we do. And they all get them, not just the lucky or the talented or the ruthless or the determined. They are the most leisured and best fed group on earth. Don't take my word for it. Ask an anthropologist. Imagine that the gods knew that Homo habilis was man, and that they knew that man is a culture builder. Imagine that they had a care for him, that they were glad to see him when he arrived, that they weren't baffled to know what to do with him, that they knew what a culture builder needs. Imagine something damnable, that they wanted Homo habilis to live as they had wanted lions to live, and seals, and hyenas, and water buffaloes, and sunflowers. They wanted him to live, short, ugly, and dim Homo habilis. Not just for 10,000 years like Homo magister. They wanted him to live for hundreds of thousands of years, for millions of years, in which to be shaped in their hands, as all who live are shaped. They wanted him to live in their hands. Not like Homo magister, who took his life into his own more competent hands, and now, after just a few thousand years, is facing death. They wanted him to live in their hands and be what he was, a culture builder. He needed a law, just one that would keep him living in their hands, that would prevent him from taking his life out of their hands. They wanted life for Homo habilis, millions of years of it. And so he needed a law, just the one law, to keep him living in their hands. One law to be incorporated into whatever cultures he might build. Just the one law to be the basis for all his cultural experiments. And of course he would experiment, just as birds experiment with nests. How else was he to learn? How else was he to become more of what we mean by human except by experimenting? He would make mistakes. Of course he would make mistakes. They wouldn't hurt him so long as he lived in their hands. He had time to try everything, living in their hands. He could try building patriarchal cultures and matriarchal cultures and patriarchal matrilineal cultures and matriarchal patrilineal cultures. He could try building monogamous cultures and polygamous cultures and monandrous cultures and polyandrous cultures and monogamous cultures and polygamous cultures. He could try building cultures in which the idea was to be generous and helpful and compassionate and cooperative. He could try building cultures in which the idea was to be cold and haughty and selfish and nasty. None of that mattered. Cultures that gave people a good life would continue and grow, and cultures that didn't would disappear. Just the way successful species continue and grow, and others don't. Homo's cultural mistakes couldn't hurt him, so long as he lived in their hands. There was only one mistake that could hurt him, only one mistake that he must not use as the foundation for any culture. Only one mistake that had to be forbidden to him, taking his life out of their hands, taking his life into his own hands, because that mistake would be deadly to man. That mistake would mean death for man.